Hello everyone and welcome to Avantika Designeering Series or ADS as we like to call it. Every week on Wednesday, we feature design and technology leaders who share their professional journey, their thoughts on their domain of work, and designeering where the world of design and engineering meet. Make sure you follow us on social media Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And with that, let's continue with your show.
Visual storytelling has now become important more than ever. As people are constantly multitasking, our attention span is shrinking rapidly. Simultaneously, the communication landscape is becoming overcrowded and cluttered as new technologies make even more demands for our attention. Visual storytelling is leveraging compelling narratives and placing the customer with an emotional visual experience. And it is effectively getting distributed across the buyer's journey to empower customers' trust. And that's why, to understand visual storytelling and communication strategy in detail, in this episode, we interact with Rupambika Kandai, creative advisor at EY or Ernst& Young. With around a decade and a half of experience, her expertise includes user experience design, branding, communication design strategy, and of course, visual storytelling. Today, on our journey of discovering designeering, we talk to her about decoding visual communication strategy. Hello, Rupambika. Welcome to Avantika Designeering podcast series. It's an honor to host you on our show today.
Hi, Rohit. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Great. So, as an icebreaker, Rupambika, you have a variety of experience and skill sets. My question is, how do you manage to shift the gears in your mind while working on different domains, right from graphic design to user experience and many more other interesting areas in the world of design? So, how do you manage all of these things?
Rohit, in my mind, it is not so much about shifting gears as much as about building layers. It is all interconnected. The fundamentals of design basically remain the same. What changes is the interpretation based on the area of design. If you take any kind of design, it can be visual design or user experience or communication design. It is ultimately about understanding the psychology of humans, right? About how they process information. So, as a brand designer, if I'm able to create a unique story for the brand, then I can actually build upon that same story to create a much more personality driven experience for their digital products. The transition from a concept to a brand identity to a digital experience becomes a seamless process then. You know, multiple skill sets actually help build a layered and enhanced brand experience across different touch points.
Interesting. In fact, with a nearly decade and a half in the industry, and now as creative advisor at Ernst and Young, can you take us through your professional journey?
Well, to be honest, I started my career with a lot of glitches. I joined and quit multiple agencies in Delhi. I was actually not sure where I belonged. Then I moved to Boston and I started working for some marketing agencies there as a consultant. My experience was incredibly varied from creating marketing campaigns for big corporates to designing magazines about marijuana. I have seen everything and I've learned a lot. Then I moved back to India, and because of my experience in the international market, I landed the role of art director for Timing UK. It was a brilliant experience because I got to work on very interesting campaigns for some iconic magazines, right? Then I got the opportunity to become the creative director of Zivame. This was my first experience in e-commerce and retail. I was able to really grow immensely here, and not only creatively but also in terms of leadership and management, because I got the chance to work on a lot of challenging opportunities in Zavame. Uh, and the mix of people there were very eclectic. It was a very different experience for me. After Zivame, I completely switched tracks and I joined EY as a creative advisor. A lot of my work in EY revolves around UI and UX, solution design, and visual storytelling. It has been very interesting here as well, and I keep learning something new every day. I also happen to freelance for startups and agencies. So, overall, yeah, it has been a very interesting journey.
Wow, interesting. I mean, designing magazines for marijuana, and that's something that I would want to catch up with you offline. But before that, one of the interesting things that you mentioned in your answer, Rupambika, was the fact that you were not very clear with what you want to do in life, and then you discovered it over a period of time. My question is, how did that happen? How did you discover? Where did your calling lie?
It's actually been it has been a very uh, interesting process, and it still is. I'm still discovering myself every day. I try out something new in terms of maybe a creative skill set, or something that just catches my attention. And I actually or the I guess what I'm really good at is trying to figure out how to learn something new, and that is what keeps me going, right? So uh, I haven't, to be very honest, I have been gathering skill sets throughout my journey, but I don't think I'm still there yet. I still think there is a lot more to learn.
Well said, Rupambika. I, moving on to my next question, what I wish to know is of all the experiences that you've had, which is that one most meaningful experience that you've had in your professional journey that has impacted you in a professional way?
So if I actually have to think about it, Rohit, it's quite difficult to single out one job or a project. But if I had to choose, I would say that my transition from Zivame to EY was a very eventful one for me, because I didn't just move from one company to another. It was a completely different domain. Plus, my role changed completely. I worked in a creative director capacity at Zavame, and at EY I was suddenly in a space where I had to leverage my experience as a user experience designer. So the switch was something that really impacted the way I would probably approach a particular project or a solution. And it kind of, like I have mentioned before, it helped me to grow as a creative person in terms of how I view a project from multiple perspectives, right? So I would say EY has been fundamental. My job in EY has been fundamental in my growth as a user experience designer.
Interesting. And, with so many things that you've done in communication design, here are my few questions that I would want to ask you on, on communication design. And the first one is that is one of the classic challenges that a designer has to face is to build a cohesive and a unified visual language for a brand. Now you have an experience in past in doing this with some of the brands. The question is, how were you able to bridge this gap as a designer?
Uh, so the idea is to always capture the pulse of the brand, in a visual format. We ask ourselves, what are the characteristics of a personality, and how do you represent that in terms of design elements? This is a fundamental question we need to answer, actually. To establish a cohesive brand language, we have to get down to the minute details: the color palette, the typography, the illustrations, the iconography, the visual imagery. Every aspect needs to come together in perfect harmony. For this, we tend to again depend on psychology. So let me give you a quick example. Let's take EY for an example. Right? It's a tax auditing and consulting company. It is supposed to be very serious and professional, right? You would tend to imagine that their branding would be on very serious note, blues and grays, and very professional in their approach. However, they have actually decided to go with a very bright yellow as their brand color, which is a very unusual choice. It's a very bold choice for a conservative auditing company. But they are actually making a statement. It means that they are confident and self assured, and therefore their advice and judgment can be taken seriously. So, if we assume that confidence is a key personality trait for EY, it needs to reflect in other visual elements as well. So, if you look at their imagery is people centric and is very clear, bright, and bold. They often show abstract images and use whimsical or surreal concepts in their photos. Their icons are clean and crisp. They have a sense of authority and a sense of presence. Their illustrations are also lively and personality driven, with a color palette that can clearly be identified as the EY. Is It's an EY branded asset. You can totally look at one of their collaterals and immediately know that it is an EY asset. So basically, it is all about building the right perceptions, I would say.
Interesting and well said. And definitely, when you speak about EY and its brand identity and logo, it's something that is beautifully done and something that resonates, and you remember it quite well. In fact, moving on to the other areas that you've mentioned as your passion, and within that, talking specifically about typography, the text is one of the primary ways designers communicate with users. Typography can make or break a design. My question is, how do you choose a typography type?
So for me, Rohit, personally, I believe typography is a very powerful design element, right? In branding, it can convey a message or evoke an emotion or even establish a brand's personality just by itself. In UI design, the right fonts and typography styles are the elements that actually set the visual hierarchy and the overall product tone, right? What I do usually is I try to use a suitable font as a base and then build upon it with customizations to create a unique typographical design language, which can then bring out the distinct personality of the product or brand. Uh, we have to think about the product. Is it playful or serious? Is it professional? Is it trying to be trendy or bohemian? The style of the typography itself can reveal a lot about a brand.
Absolutely, well said. In fact, some of the iconic logos out there have these typography that distinguish them, with others very smartly and very interestingly done. Actually, hey, did you know EY is a global professional services company and one of the big four accounting auditing firms? But EY is also a leading organization in the world of design and digital experiences. The EY Design Studios are building exciting and bringing collaborative models to engagement with some of the largest, fastest growing, and most compelling businesses in the world. Moving to my next one is talking about illustrations. And the question that I have is, what is your illustration process? And can you share some tips on creating an illustration style that is unique, well considered, and consistent?
Illustration is actually very close to my heart, because I actually wanted to be a famous artist while growing up. My dad, however, was worried that I would end up being a starving artist instead. And that's how I actually went into graphic design. Um, I honestly don't have a set process when it comes to illustration because to me, it's all about going with the flow. An illustration almost has a life of its own, it has its own energy. And I guess the illustration guides you rather than you guiding the illustration. That is how I feel about it. Uh, I guess the most important tip I would have for creating a unique illustration style is to just experiment. Everyone should just try it all, because unless we try it all, how will we ever know what our true inclination or calling is, right? Building a style is actually quite an evolved process and takes a lot of time. It takes years of dedication and practice to come up with a unique style. But I guess the starting point for anybody who wants to get into illustration is to just start experimenting, to try everything that is out there and then see what really calls out to them. Um, Another tip on the same line is to get inspiration. See, the world is now like connected like never before. Like you have access to all kinds of artists throughout the globe, right? Their creativity is on display. So everyone should just explore and study different illustrators and styles as much as possible. If I had to give a small practical tip for a unique, a consistent style, it would be to try and maintain similar elements to bring about that feeling of consistency. It could be a limited color palette, a certain type of brush stroke, similar design patterns, or maybe similar themes or proportions, small details, those kind of things. Those really help in bringing together a illustration style.
Wow, that was an interesting answer, Rupambika. And in fact, when you shared that go out and take inspiration, what I wish to know, for our listeners is whom do you take your inspiration from?
Well, Rohit, it's interesting that you should ask me this because even though I'm giving out advice about taking inspiration, I actually myself do not have a fixed style of illustration yet. It is something that I'm working towards. I typically illustrate, if I'm illustrating for a brand, I will typically try to uh, imbibe or take on the brand's personality and work accordingly. On a personal level, I actually paint. So I that is something that I have tried to develop a personal style uh, on, and that I would say my inspiration are all the great masters, obviously, Da Vinci or even Salvador Dali. But that is like a separate thing altogether. It's like something that just I enjoy. That's something that is for my personal, pleasure.
Interesting. And moving from illustration to storytelling. In fact, stories in text bore, but stories told visually engage and sell. The question is, how can brands, in your opinion, use visual storytelling as a powerful medium to engage with their customers? In fact, can you also share an example for the same?
So visual storytelling is a very, very dynamic concept, I would say, and it is rooted in fundamentals. Just tell me something. Does it ever happen to you like you have this great story in your head, but you actually can't remember if you read it in a book or saw it in a movie? Does that happen to you? It happens to me a lot.
Very often, very often.
Exactly. That's because a well-written story will actually enable us to visualize the scenes in our heads, in our minds. We do it on our own. Visual storytelling is like that. It is the perfect combination of reading a book and watching a movie at the same time. You know, one of my favorite concepts in branding is about how people will forget everything, but they will never forget how something made them feel. So, if a brand is able to capture a person's imagination and mind space through, a compelling uh, combination of visuals and stories, he's likely going to retain that positive feeling and its association with the brand. You know, so if you as a brand tell someone that you sell apparel and here is 40% off, enjoy. That someone will probably just take that 40% off and then forget all about you. But if you as a brand tell them your story, you share your like an anecdote about your origins, or you show a stunning visual about how your apparel was conceptualized, or you humanize your brand with a relatable persona, all the while you weaving a beautiful story. uh, Definitely certain aspects of that will linger in the minds of people, and it will create a lasting association. They will remember that story, if not the brand, and that is what is important, I feel.
Absolutely. I definitely agree to it. The second part of my question, Rupambika, can you share an example of a brand that has gone out and done this beautifully?
Okay, so one of my favorite brands in this regard is Spotify. If you think about it, it is an app for listening. As a product offering, it is not even trying to capture all your senses, just one, listening. But Spotify's brand visual storytelling is absolutely stunning. It has taken data and transformed it into personal visual stories for each and every one of its consumers. A Spotify brand experience is literally like no other, right? It is personal, it's delightful, it's memorable, and it's definitely an experience you'll want more of. So there is without doubt that there is no doubt that Spotify is doing an amazing job when it comes to visual storytelling.
There's absolutely no doubt. In fact, Rupambika, this is the third or fourth time when a speaker on our podcast show has actually mentioned about Spotify and its design, and how it is an app that provides an amazing experience and something that they don't want to remove from their cell phone at all. And with so many of you leaders actually resonating the same thought, it actually talks volume about the brand and the work actually done there.
Absolutely, exactly.
Great. So moving on to my next question, content and design. In fact, it's always been a chicken and egg story. Design needs content and content needs design. The question that I have is, how can communication designers bridge this gap between content and design?
Personally, I feel like the best communication design comes from a space of collaboration. When a content writer and a designer work as a team, I've seen this a lot. I used to see this a lot in Zivame. There would always be this constant like a war between the content writers and the designers as to who had ownership of the project, right? Because they were not sure how to start or where to start. And then it was always a constant like a fight between them, like who is supposed to do this. So when I feel like when a content writer and a designer work as a team and brainstorm together, the results are usually fantastic, because there is an equal amount of involvement in the ideation process, right? The sense of ownership remains strong and helps in producing a great output, as opposed to a half-hearted one where somebody has already given an idea and the other party just has to follow through and execute it. That sense of involvement is missing. Anyway, this, however, will not always be a practical approach, right? So I feel like the ideal way I would go about this would be to let the concept take the lead. A good idea always deserves to be nurtured, no matter where it came from. So, whether in content or design form, an idea should be allowed to take a definite shape. And then the collaborative approach could be considered.
Interesting. In fact, the greatest companies in the world, Rupambika, don't go out and sell. They go out and brand. However, this still seems to be an undermined area in the Indian ecosystem. The question that I have while you were talking about Spotify and content and design is, how can Indian companies build successful global brands that we can actually go out and tom about across geographies in the world?
Um, I think the key word here is the word sell itself. A lot of companies lead with the objective to sell. In their urgency to reflect those revenue numbers, brand building always takes a backseat, or it seems like a futile effort to them. But actually, when it comes to converting a consumer versus creating an experience, a great experience will always win. That is without doubt, right? And sales will follow as a natural conclusion. So I feel like a successful global brand can be created simply by focusing on a great customer experience across multiple touch points. If you think about it on a global stage, what do Indian companies have that are perceived as an advantage? They have creativity. I mean, Indians in general, they have creativity, capabilities, they have resourcefulness. There is obviously the cost advantage. There's flexibility in the way they offer services. So by building these aspects into a more nuanced narrative that promises a spectacular experience overall, I think brands can definitely become unique stories that people will remember.
Wow, that's an interesting perspective to how we could actually create large global brands or brands that resonate with a larger population. Hey, did you know EY's current partnership was formed in 1989 by merger of two accounting firms, Ernst and Winnie and Arthur Young and Company. It was named Ernst and Young until a rebranding campaign officially changed its name to EY in 2013. Although this initialism was already used informally prior to its sanctioning adoption. And from there, moving on to my next question. Rupambika, minimalism was conceived as a protest against consumerism. In fact, the relentless purchase or consumption of needless things. Today, consumerism is still widespread, but what we are copiously consume is not physical but digital. How does technology impact the minimalism art form for designing products?
I actually have a slightly different viewpoint or perspective on this, Rohit. Simply put, I feel like great technology actually celebrates minimalism as a concept. What is the purpose of technology? It is to make human lives easier and better, right? And for technology to be truly embraced, the experience needs to be simple. Minimalism, in the form and the function of how technology is accessed, is actually the key to its success. A lot of things that we now take for granted actually have huge design considerations taken into account. We just don't realize them because we just are so used to it being what it is, or products being what they are, or experiences being what they are. But we never actually consider the thought and the design that has gone behind it. And that is the beauty of minimalism, because it is visible in its invisibility. If I mean, there is no better way to put this. So we actually consume without stopping to think how easily we are able to do it. This is a function of the simplicity, right? So I'll give you a very simple example. Everyone has been to the Google site, right? You know what to expect. It's a clean white space, with a designated space for your question. There is that familiar reassuring Google logo. You know that you're in the right place. You know that you will get the answers you want, right? It is minimal, and it is very peaceful, the entire page. But now if you go over, just I would say that everyone should do this as an exercise. You should go over and check out the Bing page once, the Bing search site. It is like a cognitive nightmare, and I'm not even kidding. Like, there is an overpowering background image related to the holidays, because right now there are 5 different themes that you can try out. There is a Christmas playlist playing in the background. There are 7 8 news article cards at the bottom, and sometimes there is a fire glowing in the background. It's a moving fire. There is also snow falling at the same time. You should actually check it out. It's crazy. The my the point is that if you go on the Bing website, I will actually forget my question. I don't even know what I was thinking about, or what I wanted to ask, because it's crazy. The Like I said, the cognitive overload is insane, right? But if you compare it with Google, it is a completely uh, peaceful and a very simple experience. And that is because of the minimalism that has been used to design it in that manner, right? So my point is that in my book, minimalism is actually a method of communication. You can say a lot by what you leave out.
Wow, this is so beautifully expressed and a very interesting perspective to minimalism. This was really exciting. In fact, moving from there to the world of technology, and today technology is shaping brand communication strategy. The question that I have is, can you share an exciting example of how technology has impacted this? How has technology been used to shape up a brand communication strategy?
Okay, to answer your question, Rohit, we actually uh, should think about how it used to happen previously, right? How did brands communicate with their audience before? There were print ads, outdoor advertising, TV campaigns, right? The communication strategy was influenced or shaped by the channel and the reach. Obviously, there were limitations, they had to work around them. But since all these technological advancements, the game has changed completely. So now brands have a chance to address the global audience. So now you have AI for content generation. There are chatbots for customer service. Data can be captured on customers automatically through data capturing services. But and the most important thing is that the conversations are now happening in real time, right? Brands can actually talk to their audience on an immediate or real time basis. The relevancy and the reach is also incredibly stronger. It's much sharper. So while these are huge advantages, they can actually also be difficult. To remain relevant and consistently in conversation in a very increasingly competitive landscape is highly challenging. So the communication strategy itself needs to undergo a digital transformation, in my opinion, right? I think that what is most relevant in communication strategy right now, what would really works, is personalization. So if a brand is able to communicate with a customer about their individual needs, then they definitely have their attention. So if you think about all these brands, like what is Netflix doing? What is Amazon doing? Amazon Prime. They are able to talk to the people about what they like, what the people like individually. They're not talking about, okay, let's just check out this movie. They are telling, okay, you watched this movie and therefore you should check this out. So we really know what you are interested in or what you like. This is how they leverage technology, right? So a great brand is one that can actually be your friend. It knows your preferences, it knows your tastes, it can anticipate your needs. That is what people will uh, always incline towards, like lean towards. If you go back to Spotify as an example, what they're doing is very exciting. So a lot of companies have data about you, but it's how they use it in their communication with you. It actually makes all the difference. The Spotify knows what you listen to, when you're sad, when you're happy, when you're going to the gym. They know everything. And their campaigns are all about people, their listening habits, the popular trends, popular culture. It is extremely relatable, and that is what is making Spotify such a brilliant experience, along with all these other companies that are doing a brilliant job, right? So I feel like, again, the key is personalization, at least right now.
Interesting. And absolutely, today we've seen, while you expressed about Google, Bing a few moments ago, we've seen how they're using technology to personalize their pages, personalize their services to make it more relevant for the user. In fact, they're doing some really interesting things under Google for Business as well. And now we see in the recent updates, we see very interesting features that they've introduced in Google Meet and a couple of other products as well. But moving from talking about the world of Google to one of my last questions. As customer journeys become increasingly complex and users interact with brands across a number of channels, customer service, retail, campaigns, websites, social media apps, events, and the list goes on. Experienced designers must navigate these realms to create consistent, connected experiences. The question that I have for you, Rupambika, is how do leaders like you manage to provide a seamless experience across this huge, ever increasing list of channels out there?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. So, Rohit, it seems like a very complicated web of channels, and it looks like it's a very complicated network. However, uh, for me, there are only two words in play here. One is familiarity, and the second is consistency. So every brand has a story to tell, right? So, no matter what the channel, the story remains the same, only the representation changes. So, one of the most fundamental concepts that humans actually thrive on is familiarity. They see something they recognize, they're very happy. It's like, it's something like running into a friend at a grocery store. It's always pleasant to see someone you recognize, right? Like you will always be like, hey, what are you doing here? It's always like a fun, pleasant thing, right? So if a brand presents the same experience across channels, people cannot get confused. They will always remember because they're like, hey, I saw this. Okay, yeah, it's the same experience here as well. It registers in their head. They remember that positive experience. This is where consistency comes in. To ensure familiarity, we have to bring in consistency in the customer experience. The brand story, the messaging, the visual language, the small tiny details all contribute towards a positive experience. If they experience the same feeling every time, they will remember the story and the brand.
Absolutely. And that brings us to our last question on our show today. At Avantika, we are propagating the philosophy of designeering, which is the blended approach of design and engineering. My question to you is, do you see these domains interplay in your field and believe that there is a scope for this blended approach in future?
I actually find the philosophy of designeering very interesting, especially because of how it makes sense on the most fundamental level. See, ultimately, everything is about understanding human behavior and anticipating their needs, right? So in UX, for example, a good product lets a user follow the most optimal path to fulfilling his purpose. It takes a complex problem and then turns it into an intuitive solution. That is the mark of a good product. So this process, in my mind, in my opinion, this process actually involves a lot of fundamentals that come from engineering at its core. So there are like identifying the problem statement, ideation by brainstorming, figuring out the functionality, and ultimately prototyping and testing the product. What UX additionally accounts for is the design and the aesthetics. So the product when combined together, the design aspect of it and the engineering aspect of it, the product becomes a perfect example of great usability as well as distinct user appeal, which is essentially makes a great user experience. So it is like a perfect partnership, in my opinion. So the future is obviously very bright. So while technology will advance, the fundamentals will always remain the same. The user will always be at the heart of the product, and so the same principles will be at play. Probably what will change is adoption by, in fact, by more and more entities, which only means that the concept will get stronger and more widely accepted.
Wow, this was an interesting conversation with you, Rupambika. Thank you so much for joining us on our show and sharing uh, so many interesting ideas, so many interesting inputs and strategies from the world of communication design. Thank you so much for joining us on our show.
Thank you so much, Rohit. It was wonderful talking to you. Thank you again for having me. This was like a refresher course for me as well. But I really enjoyed this, and I hope that my experience will be of some use to someone who's aspiring, to get into user experience and visual communication. Thank you.
Hey there, we hope you enjoyed our show. Do write to us on ads@avantika.edu.in. We look forward to your opinions, feedbacks, and suggestions of speakers you would like us to host on this show. Do tune in our channel next week on Wednesday for a new story on Hubhopper or wherever you get your podcast from. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter.